Hello everybody, welcome back to the Overlap Breakdown YouTube channel. I'm joined as always by my good friend Umir, who's a professional football scout and analyst, and we're here to cover the preview of the biggest game come next weekend in the Premier League, which is Arsenal against Liverpool. Liverpool in the last weekend obviously got the 2-1 win against Chelsea, which we also covered on here. And to be fair, we actually did all right, didn't we? Yeah. And we're going to cover a bit of today of how Liverpool maybe can adapt and can look forward from that game, because there were good things, but there were also bad things. So, top line, Arsenal this season, what have kind of you made about them? It's been a bit of a tricky start to Arsenal this season, but tactically, what Mikel Arteta is trying to do, what have you noticed that's maybe a bit different from last season?
I think when we're looking at Arsenal in general, they sort of go between sort of this 4-3-3 shape that we've seen from them last season, but obviously they're dealing with sort of a big injury in Martin Odegaard, and we've seen through some of their transfer strategy that they've signed certain players and certain profiles of players that are now coming into the fray. We've seen Marino play just this last week. They've signed Raheem Sterling to play on this wing. But between the 4-3-3 that we've seen from Arsenal, we've also seen them sort of deploy a 4-2-4 with players like Trossard, this role that Havertz has used, and he's often times this season played in midfield roles, but also played in that attacking line. And we've discussed this before, but he's kind of now this established number 9 for Arsenal in general. With Arsenal, it's very hard to just nail down a single shape and analyse that, because they play on so many fluid rotations. But what they've been trying to do this season is, first in the build-up, and we'll get into this later into the video, but in the build-up there's numerous shapes, sort of a 3-1, a 2-2, the movements of the fullbacks in Calafiori, in Timber have been, I mean, it's almost hard to track and nail down in a specific number or a specific shape. I think if we're talking about principles from this Arsenal side, what we've noticed is this sort of double pivot of usually Partey and Declan Rice now, and then that third midfielder or that second striker. But I would say that's generally how they've set up to play. Their principles are similar in the sense that they aim to push teams deep, establish a lot of possession, and oftentimes this season they've got their joy from not necessarily being able to break down stubborn blocks all of the time, but through the quality of Bukayo Saka to create something through that sustained pressure or through some of their set pieces, because they've got a brilliant, set piece threat in the deliveries of someone like Saka, and then in the actual ability to execute on those from the likes of Saliba, Gabriel, etc.
Yeah, you touched a bit about on Arsenal's transfer recruitment in the past few seasons. We took a close look at this, and basically I think a lot of people kind of jumped on the bandwagon to say that Arsenal needed like a cutting-edge attacker and a cutting-edge centre-forward. Now, I actually don't believe it was a centre-forward that they needed. I thought it was potentially like another wide threat. Yeah. So maybe someone to kind of replicate the kind of stuff that Bukayo Saka's doing on one side. And to kind of give you an insight into how the transfer strategy has looked, Leandro Trossard and Raheem Sterling were the only players not over 6 foot against Bournemouth at the weekend, which kind of just shows you how much they're favouring the physicality side of the duels. You've got to win them duels. And I think looking forward to this game, it's going to be very, very interesting, because obviously William Saliba, who's been one of their best players under Arteta, is not going to be available for the game. And we kind of spoke about how instrumental obviously the two defenders are when defending the box, but obviously they're good at carrying the ball, playing with the ball. Who do you think is going to line up in the back line without William Saliba now that he's not going to be there, he's going to be suspended? Who do you think is going to line up there, and what do you think the back line is going to look like on paper for this game?
Yeah, we spoke a little bit about it briefly, but in general, I think it's a little bit difficult to predict because some players are still coming back from being out, etc. Depends a little bit on their fitness, but we've seen Timber in that right-back position for Arsenal this season. In pre-season, actually, I mentioned we saw Timber in that centre-back position with White in right-back. Arteta at that time explained his decision for that because he didn't want to disrupt the relationships that he had in his team with the players already there. We've seen that great relationship over seasons now with White at right back, Odegaard in central midfield and Saka on the right, and he didn't want to disrupt that, so to get Timber minutes he put him in at centre back. Obviously this season we've seen a change. We've seen Timber play primarily in that right back position and Saka play on that right wing, and Timber's rotations infield have been paramount to some of Arsenal's success so far. So in following that same logic, I think it might be likely that we see Timber on that right side and White pair Gabriel in those central areas. I've spoken about sort of the dog and the cat centre-back pairing, one being sort of front-footed, biting, aggressive, and that's Gabriel. Saliba tends to be a player who kind of sweeps up behind him and is a bit more measured on the ball. Exactly, and I think White suits that profile a little bit more, taller as well. I know there was conversations about his ability to win duels aerially before he signed, but again, he's still a player who's taller than Timber to provide that height in there.
So one thing to note about Arsenal is that obviously Martin Ødegaard is still not available, so the midfield construction is going to look a bit interesting. Last season, in this particular game, Arsenal went with a similar approach. I'm going to throw up a average positions graphic from the last game at the Emirates last season. Ibrahim Konate was sent off in that game. Arsenal won 3-1, but this was probably the first time we sort of seen what Umir's got up or set up on the left-hand side of me here, which is the 4-2-4, and this player next to Havertz was Martin Ødegaard. Now, we believe that this player is probably going to be Leandro Trossard, and that Arsenal are probably going to run with Rice and Partey, or Rice, Marino, or one of the two midfielders next to Rice, and that's basically going to hold down the middle of the pitch, and then Arsenal are going to commit one of the other midfielders forward, which will be Leandro Trossard, and that will create the 4-2-4. I think, obviously, we can't go this far in to talk about Arsenal without mentioning Bukayo Saka. He will be back for this game, most likely anyway. He's scored, or he's contributed to 60% of Arsenal's goals in the Premier League this season. Only Cole Palmer, Dwight McNeil, Liam Delap and Mohamed Salah have got more percentages. Great list. Liam Delap's in great company.
And McNeil.
And Dwight McNeil.
Love McNeil, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously the one player that Bukayo Saka is behind and maybe looking to overtake in the next coming years is Mohamed Salah as we move swiftly on to Liverpool. This is probably one of the best big game players we've ever seen in the Premier League. Mohamed Salah has now scored and assisted in 34 Premier League matches, which only Wayne Rooney has managed to do. And Salah's lowest goals and assists involvement in an entire season in the Premier League during his career is 27. Obviously not taking into account the Chelsea stuff. Against Chelsea, you can't really factor in how good world-class players can be for you.
Yeah.
But that is the definition of a game winner. A game breaker.
And his creativity, I think, especially this season on show, has been ridiculous.
The kind of what he's doing against the big six teams. Arne Slot's playing a different sort of brand, which we'll get onto next, but he's kind of got a bit more space. I feel like he's got a bit more free roam. Obviously, we've seen the right-sided rotations with like maybe Szoboszlai and Trent Alexander-Arnold, and they kind of rotating around each other, which has always suited Salah. It's something that Jurgen Klopp used to do with Henderson and Trent. But I feel like now in the bigger games, like we saw against Chelsea, Mohamed Salah's actually got kind of a better suited role, which kind of limits the amount of running he's doing and lets him have like a larger impact in these bigger games because he's got so much space to work with, he's got so much energy, and he's being given the free roam to kind of play a bit higher because obviously Liverpool's forwards kind of pin really high. We're going to move on to how Liverpool out of possession were, even though they won the game against Chelsea. Me and Umir kind of noticed a few things that Liverpool need to maybe improve on in these big games. So what we're going to go from here is this is obviously how Liverpool set up on paper, and then Liverpool kind of move into the 4-2-4 shape, which we spoke about on the preview. Now, one thing that Chelsea managed to do was put 4 players in and around this vicinity, around Liverpool's 2-man midfield. And what this meant was these 2 strikers couldn't really press as high as they wanted to. So they were covering the players who were stuck in behind them, so they were dropping in a little bit more. And then the 2 players who created the box here, which was Cole Palmer and Malo Gusto, they were basically being forced to man mark then. And what that meant was Liverpool couldn't actually get out of the block to press. And that saw Chelsea have the highest pass completion of any away team in the Premier League at Anfield since 03-04, which is incredible to say the least. And I don't think it's much of a surprise when you kind of look at how Arne Slot has changed Liverpool. And they went from basically trying to press high in a 4-2-4. Basically, the wingers are gambling. He's a gambling man out of possession. But when it comes in, it drops really low. And all of a sudden, they can't really get out to press and to jump. So Arsenal, despite not having more of the ball than Manchester City or Tottenham Hotspur in the 2 games they've played against the Big Six this season, they're going to have to maybe come out a little bit more and be on the ball. Now, I want to touch on something that's on Umir's side, which is basically something that Arsenal do on the ball that's similar to how Chelsea saw much success in terms of rotating around the midfield. And I want Umir to kind of touch on how Arsenal could get in between these 2 midfielders when the wingers are so high.
Yeah, I think, your point is really nicely made. And when we've seen Liverpool try and press in that way with those 2 midfielders going man for man, and the front two of Liverpool trying to push on the ball a little bit. If the ball does pass that first line, and it has done through the great passing for Chelsea, for example, of their central defenders, you then get this overload. And what we've seen from Arsenal that's been brilliant this season, and we're seeing it more, is this rotational build-up. So obviously you'll have your keeper involved at times, and we've seen sort of sometimes a double pivot here. If Liverpool do push on in that 4-2-4, that I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these movements similar to what we saw from Caicedo, similar to what we saw from Palmer, for example, from Gusto as well in these areas, in one of these sort of attacking players. And in doing so, the man-for-man pressure from Liverpool will be focused on the double pivot, probably Partey and Rice, but then in receiving or moving out into these areas, then we get some of that space in wide areas for Arsenal to progress the ball. A term that I've seen used is double width, and it's when sort of players go into these areas, pick up the ball, and you've almost got two players on the flank here. In this situation, I wouldn't be surprised to see someone like Trossard picking up the ball here when the Liverpool midfield are focused on the central players, and then both of them attacking this area here. We've seen it with Declan Rice and Martinelli on that side, but just in general, I think playing through those wide areas when the central area is so compact is something that Arsenal will certainly look to do, and with the quality of their centre-backs to spray passes through the lines, especially if you do have Timber or White in those areas who are extremely proficient on the ball in trying to find those players a little bit higher up.
Yeah, I think one of the things you kind of mentioned there, and obviously we've touched on kind of how Arsenal like to use a 4-2-4 and they've got a line of four. One of the things that we talked about last week in the preview for Chelsea-Liverpool was that Chelsea maybe can get to the final third really well, but they can't penetrate in behind. Yeah. And we kind of saw something like that at Anfield, where Chelsea seemed to have had the majority of the possession. I think they had like 61% of the ball, but they couldn't really fashion any clear-cut chances except from the Nicholas Jackson one, which was a beautiful run right down the middle, off the shoulder. Against Arsenal, Liverpool are going to have a bit of a different situation. Chelsea kind of committed, they play kind of with like a false nine, as we know, but Arsenal are going to play with pretty much a flat line of four, which means they're going to be man-to-man. Now, Liverpool haven't really had many situations where they've had to go man-to-man in the back line, and Kai Havertz in the game last season was really good in this position, and I kind of wanted to talk about this. So we have Ibrahim Konate, who's was not good at the Emirates. He got sent off, he got double yellows, and Havertz was dropping in and out of these spaces, similar to how Nicholas Jackson does. Yeah. But the problem is when Nicholas Jackson was going in, he had no one running in behind. Kai Havertz is going to have, as we're talking about there, a second player next to him. Whether or not it's going to be Leandro Trossard or maybe like a Jesus or something like that.
Yeah,
or
Jesus is a good point, yeah.
So they're going to, while Kai Havertz is going to be dropping into midfield and Konate is going to be rushing in there, they're actually going to have runners in behind him. Yeah. Now, obviously, Konate is a very aggressive defender, as we know. It's kind of like the fire and ice thing you were talking about. Yeah. But when they're pushing up, when they're going in, they need to watch him behind them because they're going to be having runners, and that's how Arsenal scored a couple of the goals at the Emirates in this exact fixture last season. Yeah. So I think it's going to be an interesting test for Liverpool to see how they cope with man-to-man across the entire back line. And I don't think Liverpool have had many games this season where Van Dijk and Konate and Trent and Robertson have all had to go man-for-man, and they've kept that back line consistent all season long. Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting in there. I wanted to move on to basically how we spoke about how Arsenal could cause them problems. We've got the four forwards pinning. Liverpool is a very interesting one because we're so used to seeing a high pressing, high in the face kind of Liverpool team that gets up against them, and Arsenal basically took advantage of the space last season against them when they pressed them high. How do you expect Arne Slot to set up? Do you think Arne Slot is going to set up in a mid block and kind of look to get in behind with the likes of Salah, Diaz, Nunes even? He was really good against Chelsea when he come on. Or do you expect Liverpool to maybe control the game?
Yeah, I think with Liverpool, especially under Arne Slot, what we've seen is a variation in how the backline builds up, and then in general their sort of defensive philosophy has been to set up in the sort of mid-block shape and then pick their moments to try and press them. But I think a hallmark of this Arne Slot side has been to leave players up in what we term like sort of rest attack.
Yeah.
When your team's defending, who do you have up the field ready to attack and launch those counter-attacks? I think Mo Salah is a player who can certainly do that. Luis Diaz is a player who can certainly do that as well. And sort of looking for those switches against a side where sort of the players might have moved inside, and especially if you don't have Saliba in the back line, if you have someone like Timber or you have someone like White, switching the play over and going 1v1 against those players is certainly a solution that they can look towards. In general, otherwise, I think you've got the individual quality of someone like Trent to play off of some of that set piece quality. I think it's difficult because it's a game of fine margins, and we've spoken about Arsenal being this team that are really pragmatic, that really like don't give up chances. So in, not trying to give up chances, I think it will be the counter-attacking situations that Liverpool can try and get some joy off of. Particularly in how they're setting up with this pragmatic side.
I think it'll be like a slower approach in build-up, I reckon, for Arsenal to try and maybe manipulate and move them around and try and entice the press onto them. But I think at the end of the day, maybe going long is probably a good idea, trying to maybe pull the centre-halves out the back line, making
especially
them
with
press
two of them,
with the two runners in behind. I think this is going to be a really interesting battle. The 4v4 is going to be really, really interesting, and I think if Trossard does get that, or if Jesus does get that, I think we could see a situation.
Even Marino could play in that sort of role.
I think we are going to see some kind of like in behind ghosting runs into the penalty area for cutbacks. Finally, we'll probably get onto the predictions now. We're going to stick our neck out on the line here. So, full time, the game finishes at the Emirates. Is Arne Slot going to go carry on this ridiculous run, or what do you think?
Player quality, I've always said this, and I think Klopp benefited from it, obviously, because you've got sort of all-timers in the team. Your centre-backs are unbelievable in their individual quality.
Set pieces are going to be interesting as well.
Yeah.
Because Arsenal are obviously the set-piece team. They conceded one against
Bournemouth.
Konate
in there.
But then they've got Konate.
You lose Saliba.
They've lost quite a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see if Liverpool can maybe take advantage of the margins against Arsenal in terms of the set pieces, because Liverpool have got a mammoth of a team. It feels like they've got a mammoth of a team because of how big the two centre-halves are. But even when that's all there is to aim.
No, but even in their physicality, Nunes, for example, Szoboszlai as a physical profile, Gravenberch. It's a tough one. I think
the Emirates will be up for this as well.
Yeah. But in nervy moments, the Emirates feel the nerves as well, though. I'm going to go... I think Arsenal will look better. But will they have enough quality to score? I'm going to go 1-1.
1-1?
Yeah. It's a proper safe
I was thinking of a draw as well, but I was going to go 2-2. I just think when I look at Salah, and I just look at him in a big game, I'm like, well, that's one goal. So they're definitely scoring. So I'm probably going to say 2-1 Arsenal.
Fine.
I'm going to say 2-1 Arsenal. I think Rice and whoever plays next to Rice, it'll probably be Partey. But whoever plays there, I reckon they can kind of win the second balls. They can calm it down, get the ball on the floor, play a little bit more intricate. I think it's going to be kind of a different performance from Arsenal than what we're used to seeing. I think Arsenal have kind of got this pragmatic approach. But when they're at home, especially against a team like Liverpool now, I think Arteta will want them to come out. I think
as long as they pen a team in,
I think they'll look to pen them in, and I just have to guarantee a goal on the transition threat with Mohamed Salah. But no, that's it for everyone watching at home. That is going to be a very, very interesting game. But thank you very much for watching, as always. Like, comment and subscribe if you want to see more of these tactical previews, and thank you for the support on the last one. It means a lot. So yeah, we'll catch you next week. See you later.